Podcast time. Episode 4.
It is. It's good to be back again. Hope you guys are doing good out there. How's your week been?
Busy.
Yeah?
Yeah.
No evacuations?
Oh, no. Fires aren't near us this time. Thank you.
Yeah. Our place up in the mountains, they've just decided to turn the power off in the whole community just to be safe. Must be pretty serious.
I heard that's a possibility for the campfire fire up north. Power lines, but who knows?
Okay.
Speculation at this point, I guess.
Why don't we start with stupid questions?
All right.
Here's a stupid question, sort of. Well, it's just a question that's like along those lines. Think about your house right now, and it's like, boom, 5 minutes, you have to evacuate. It's pretty likely your house is going to burn down. What are you grabbing? If you're the only one home. So family's safe. Just material objects. Do you have anything that's just like you could grab that would be the first thing you grab?
Well,
what would it be?
I think I've cheated on this question just as last time because I had to do this.
Oh, you did?
In
that's right.
In August, except we didn't have 5 minutes. We had an hour. I can tell you what we grabbed.
What'd you get?
Every hard drive. I have a Mac Mini, so I just grabbed that small.
Mm-hmm. Your couch.
And I grabbed, I guess the most kind of odd item that wouldn't be obvious is I grabbed my 1980 American-made Music Master bass.
Oh, yeah.
That I got when I was 10 years old. It's a 3/4 scale bass, which I learned to play on, and I never graduated to a full scale. So to this day, like that's my bass, and
you're sticking to it.
Well, I've had it for 38 years, and it's just I've gutted it, new pickups, new pots, new everything, refinished it. So I mean, I've taken care of it, and it's just been around forever.
What's that old saying about weddings? Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. I think that goes for maybe what you'd grab when there's a fire coming. So you have something new and something old. If I had lent you something, would you be like, oh, I got to grab that and get it back to Adam?
No.
Okay.
You just make me another one. I left your artwork on the wall.
Oh.
It's already dead.
That hurts a little bit. That's true.
If you haven't seen his artwork, then you can look that up. But we grabbed we have pretty actually compressed file system, so it wasn't hard to grab all that stuff because most everything's on the hard drive. So I just grabbed a few little file crates and then hard drives, grabbed my bass. Actually, Monica mentioned that she was actually surprised when it came down to us evacuating. That she didn't have much to grab.
Really?
Yeah. She was like, it was comforting to her. It's like, well, if we lost everything, then, who cares? We're alive, right?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That was probably nice to hear, too. It's like, oh, wow. When it all comes down, you're not materialistic.
Yeah. Not when there's a fire, anyway. We did drive 2 cars, so we got those out of there.
That's true.
Yeah.
What would I grab, you ask? No. I think that was smart to hard drives.
Yeah.
That's huge.
It's tiny.
It's so much.
It's tiny and huge.
So much work and so much, potential value and real value and all kinds of stuff. It's crazy how much we rely on hard drives and information digitally. I keep thinking about like how much we rely on it, but also like the way it relates to music. This is gonna be a reach here, and it's in a tangent, but like the idea of what music would exist if there was some sort of crazy solar flare and we lost all electricity. What music would keep going?
I'm smiling because you've done this before. You've done this mental exercise before.
And I know it's it's a little bit of confirmation bias mixed in with reality.
I think you sent this to me in an email, and I have it flagged. I have it saved.
Really?
No, it's actually pretty cool. But yeah, how much we rely on, or how much creativity in the arts, in music especially, is so reliant on electricity.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not stomping your foot, clapping your hands, singing, acoustic guitar, acoustic drumming. It's a different thing.
Yeah, and depending on your belief system about the history of the world, I mean, electricity is very, very new in terms of us harnessing it. Obviously, there were lightning bolts a long time ago, but just the idea that we could use electricity, or even just think of it as like the advent of recording, it's Thomas Edison, and music got here thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years without the help of electricity. And what was that music? Which is interesting to think that, like, if the power goes down and all you have is your laptop to make music from, your music would die with your laptop. And if you didn't have some way to physically express your art, with a drum or your voice, which, Corey and I got into that. And I recently spoke at Concordia University and got deeper into that subject of like why, with Corey, we were talking and I threw it out there that it would be awesome, I think, and helpful for every musician to put a little effort into learning how to sing and some effort into learning how to drum. And then I realized, like, oh, of course I'm biased because I'm a drummer and I sing, but I also feel like those are the two oldest instruments.
Well, there's no gatekeeper on those instruments.
No gatekeeper. It's the oldest instruments, and they are possibly the only two instruments that you can go to your physical ends in playing them. You can hit a drum as hard as you can, and you can yell and scream and sing as hard as you can.
That's something we've talked about before.
Yeah.
I find it was definitely not something that I had thought about previously, and it's super interesting. I actually use it when I'm teaching and that subject comes up. It's there's something special about that. Just percussion in general. I mean, it depends on what percussion, of course, but
right.
That you can use the full strength of your body to create the sound, and of course vocals as well. Something that you couldn't do on a whole host of instruments.
Yeah, like,
you just name it. Like if you really put your full strength into a guitar, I mean, you'd break it.
Yeah, it's super. I think it's a powerful idea that you can be completely physically unrestrained if need be, or if you want to. But then again, there's obviously a lot of power and restraint. Whenever I pick up a guitar, for example, that has really light gauge strings on it, I feel like I can't. I go to do something that has some intensity to it, and I'm just like, oh, I have to hold back so much. I can't squeeze and I can't hit as hard. It goes out of tune, or I break a string. And whenever a real guitar player picks up one of my guitars, which is a drummer's guitar, the strings are like, telephone cables. Like, it's just like telephone cables, power lines. They're just like super thick gauge. I want to be able to hit that thing just about as hard as I can, if possible, if I need to. But I also squeeze hard. It's just kind of dumb. But I need to learn restraint. But okay, so there's that.
Yeah, there's your stupid question morphed into whatever we were just talking about.
Yeah.
We got
you want to move out of stupid questions and into better, smarter questions?
Yeah.
These are some questions that we neglected to see on Twitter on the last episode that we were in together back in Julian. And let me see here. Okay. Bryce Button, at Bryce Button. Do you guys feel your artistic freedom is confined by the identity of Broken City? Broken City. It's a question. Is the goal of Broken City to stay within the boundary of your identity, or do you guys try to push outside that boundary?
I like this question.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I read it. I read it a couple days ago. I noticed that we missed some questions on Twitter. Yeah, it's been a challenge because we want to stay. I am conscious of your aesthetic, and
Mine personally?
yes, and I have my own aesthetic, and Kevin has his own aesthetic. So with the three of us working together, and of course, there's everybody on the team contributes something at some point. But generally speaking, like the catalyst of each endeavor comes from the three of us. So it's been interesting, the way I stay conscious of your aesthetic. And I think I've almost gotten to the point where this is our 4th year right now, where I feel like it's just second nature, and I don't think about it so much in the conscious mind as much as I used to. So there's that sort of, I don't know if I'd call it a boundary, but it's we're not going to go out there and do a techno, neon light kind of show, and I don't think that's an artificial boundary where I would do that if you weren't part of this team. I think it's I don't know if I would do that just on my own.
Yeah, that'd be part of like our shared aesthetic. I think you and I are like kind of like circles that join, like we have a shared aesthetic, and then
right. But what's funny is if I look back at some stuff I've done, historically last 25 years, I've been all over the place. I haven't been really focused. It's one thing that I really admired about you, is that as you go back and you kind of see the development of where you are now, it's a really focused, deliberate sense of the world that you create within, like your own personal ecosystem. And it's something that I wish I had figured out sooner than when I look back. So in a sense, I think what Broken City is, I don't think we're, I don't remember the language that he used. He didn't use the word stifled, right? But it's not stifling or I don't feel like I'm
artistic freedom. Do you feel your artistic freedom is confined?
No, confined. That's the word I was looking for. No, in fact, I think in terms of just looking at an XY axis or even like a 3D axis, it's instead of looking, out at the planes and looking 360 degrees around you, I feel like what Broken City has done for me and just working with this team is we've just looked down as far as if you want to create that metaphor, like we're looking down and we're digging and we just keep digging. So when do you run out of earth to dig? And I don't feel like we've even scratched the surface. So I feel like, yeah, in a sense, there's boundaries and there's parameters on our aesthetic. If you take the 360 degree approach or metaphor, but as far as like digging down in, digging deep,
yeah,
I feel like we have miles to go, and I like exploring looking inward instead of looking outward, I guess. And so, I mean, even if you were to just look at a single human being and you were to say, how complex are you? What's in that head of yours, and what's going on in there? What
a lot of wind.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you feel confined by yourself? Do you feel confined by how complex you are? And I think every human being on the planet would say no. Like,
yeah, it would
no,
be yes.
We're all complex. We're all infinitely complex. So,
but I would also say yes. Like I feel confined by my limitations, but I don't feel confined. Maybe there's certain areas where I feel maybe there's so much potential that I haven't fulfilled, and maybe it's partially a hope that I can push. I could, even if I had more discipline than I have in all areas of my life, I could push as hard as I can and never reach full potential and then die. So it's almost like, yes, I feel infinitely unconfined in some areas, and that there's so much below the surface that I keep learning, and then time keeps going by, and there's so much input from the world and all this stuff. But then I'm also constantly reminded by how much I am confined by my own whatever talents or intellect or whatever it might be, you know?
And you said limitations. I think I feel like that is a different topic.
Maybe it is.
Because I feel like what he's asking here is more of a...
Do we run out of content or something?
Well,
or inspiration?
I think what he's asking is we have sort of a deliberate aesthetic. It's authentic, but it's deliberate, meaning we've imposed some rules on ourselves. Like, I want to make sure I'm not leaving any details out here, but basically that everything is real and authentic. Like when we used microphones and microphone cables hanging from props. And I remember there was a critique that we were in once, and somebody said, "Oh, why don't you just sample it so that it works every time?" Because sometimes it wouldn't work. The mic cables would not be plugged in correctly. I was like, well, that defeats the purpose. The whole point is that that we're really taking these microphone cables and stretching them across the floor and plugging them in real time during the show. And
there's something there. Something you get out of that challenge.
And the sounds that come through those microphones are being made by the members on the floor. It's not sampled. And you can hear that. And clearly we're out of tune in some of it. And it's like we were actually okay with that from a
musical...
just from an achievement standpoint, it's like, well, yeah, if it's out of tune, I mean, you kind of know it's real, because I've stood out there on the floor. It's hard to hear a pitch center when you're out in the middle of the floor. The speakers are facing the audience. You're kind of in this no man's land, and you're just singing.
And the margin of error is pretty wide, especially depending, because the Doppler effect. There's different pitches,
and they're not professional vocalists.
Yeah, and they're nervous, and they're...
Well,
excited,
even regardless if
adrenalized.
Let's just assume they're not nervous. They're performers, but let's say at their best, they're not nervous and they're just going for it. The point is that it's happening in real time. That was the gimmick, if you will, if you want to call it that, is that it's real. It's happening in real time. So we want to approach things like that. Approach everything like that. Like a prop is. It's not really a prop. It's a thing that we use that actually works. Or if it's got chains, it actually doesn't work. Too often. Those chains, man. Oh, glad we did it, but
it's a metaphor.
Never doing it again. So when it comes to, like, you know, we're going to have this thing on the floor and it's going to do this thing, there is no backup plan. There is no, we'll sample it just so it works. And sometimes it's not a good competitive decision when you do that. But I think it's something. It's a choice, right? It's
a choice for. It adds a little bit more of a chaos factor. It adds more to strive towards, I think, and like there, like you get something in art when you leave room to strive. When you can hear the striving, there's something there. Like I've always appreciated with singers when they're high range, you can feel the striving. Whereas if it's so easy for you to hit a high note, I think you lose some of the emotion that's possible when you strive. Like
we were talking about this with John Lennon's vocal on Twist and Shout.
Yeah.
We did this before. It's just that
doesn't sound totally in control, but it's
he's nuts, and he's like pushing these notes he can't possibly hit, and then he kind of hits them.
Yeah.
And then it's like probably one of my favorite vocal performances of all time. Just
you get
crazy.
yeah, you feel the reaching. And I think that's a big part of why we love sports too. Like you can feel the reaching. You're rooting for somebody who's like, oh, at the edge of their strength, the edge of their abilities. And when you build that into a show that you're trying to make really perfect, across multiple dimensions, not just perfect across one dimension, like clean,
right?
But you're going for all these different things, and there's all the striving. Like, why not just let the vocal parts be striving also,
this is
if possible?
really interesting as a spectator, or just someone who's appreciating whatever's happening, whatever the medium is. The balance between the striving, let's just call it that, and the recognition of the obvious, like hours. And I mean hours, I mean like 10,000 hours of development of a particular skill. Like when you're witnessing the comfort level of the performer, where they're just doing this crazy virtuosic stuff, and clearly as you're taking this in, you're processing how many thousands of hours did that take to perfect. Like there's a beauty in that. And then to balance that with the striving part too. It's like when you, let's take the John Lennon vocal, for instance. When you listen to that vocal, I don't hear 10,000 hours. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I hear like a confidence, and which may have come from 10,000 hours, but I hear a confidence in that striving, and that like, just like, I'm going to belt this out no matter what. And whatever happens at the end of this take it's staying on the record.
Yeah.
And but then there's other things you listen to and you're like, whoa, just the precision, like that, how they've developed their craft and their skill and their sensibilities with the minute tasks, whatever they happen to be doing. It's also mind blowing. So I mean, there's so many different, there's a balance, and you can go overboard. Like I'm fully admitting that sometimes we go the wrong way and things don't work out exactly how we want them. But
I think when things don't work out, it's like proof of the striving too. Like there's so many levels of analysis with this, because you want to, mastery of something like allows for you to get further, right? So if all you're doing is striving to the point where it's actually, you're tipping the scales into like, oh, it's like, man,
too much, you just practice?
Too much striving. You're not ready to perform.
Yeah, that's right.
But too much mastery it looks easy, and sometimes that can be beautiful too, because it's just sort of transcendent. But since art is a metaphor for life, or art uses metaphor, but it's analogous to life, I guess you could say, and life is about struggle and striving and moving. It's like when you see that in art, you're seeing something that's been created that has some kind of metaphorical value, but then you're also seeing the struggle of life happening in the art, and there's something about that reflection that's like incredible. And I think I guess it's proven that what people love to see is maybe at the highest level of both, because if you have mastery of something, let's say you can play a really complex piece that's been written with a ton of heart, and then it's completely within your control to play it.
Complacent with the amount of risk that you're taking.
Yeah, but there are performers, I think, who do take that level of mastery and performance, but then they strive emotionally. So it's like, it's almost like on a different axis. They're striving to be in the moment and to allow a certain, there's a French word for it that I don't know, but that certain something, that X factor, you'd call it, like that transcends. That's what it is. What is it?
I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, but je ne sais quoi, is that right?
That sounds great
Something
to me.
Of the what?
Yeah. And it means I don't know what. I don't
Maybe.
know what. I just saw that written down somewhere. But that's what it is. I guess in a lot of ways, if you're striving for technical excellence, you're really striving to get to the point where you can release that I don't know what element. Right.
I think that's really apparent in this neck of the woods as far as marching arts, when an ensemble is clearly like virtuosic in every way, and just kind of sitting on it. And I think that's one thing like we never want to be, never want to do. And in that,
oh yeah, dude.
In the quest to be perfect, like just don't forget to push beyond comfort.
And it's where you're pushing too, I think, because you can get to that level of mastery, and once you're there, you can make a decision to, like you said, sit on it and like rest on your laurels or express ego, or you can go the other direction and try to find that special something that's actually digging deeper emotionally. And you often see the latter, or the former. you often see the ego part, like, I'm so good, like, bam, that was easy. Hey, so that's annoying, because that's like being a show off, I guess. And when you see somebody that's clearly has the so-called right to be arrogant, or like they could go that direction and they choose to try to disappear into their work with the mastery, then it's like transcendent. It's epic. You know what I wanted to say about that question too, to answer it from my perspective, looking in on you and Kevin, is you said, do we feel confined? And I'd say we it depends on how you define confined, but I think I would say like if I read the question for myself, I would say definitely, and that's the point, because it's almost like we could look at ourselves as like a 3-piece rock band or something. You've decided these are the people, this is the thing. We accept our limitations, but also accept that we're going to have to be industrious, and like we're going to have to find everything within ourselves and go toward the infinite depth instead of digging where there's really nowhere to dig.
Right. I think it's like if you have a favorite band and then either they break up or they're on hiatus and they do solo projects. Solo projects are always different. They're always a different personality. There's similarities obviously, but it's never the same as the band that's together. So I guess in that respect, I agree with you. Like when the three of us are committed to doing this project together, we're not on hiatus. We're active. There are parameters, but they're not heavy-handed. I think it's just it happens by. It just happens naturally. I'm not contriving certain things. In fact, there's some times where I steer clear of certain things because it's gotten a little cliche. Like let's take for instance, like the Edison bulb. There's even I read Reddit, and they have these subreddits that have like starter packs. I don't know if you've ever seen these. But it's like hip new restaurant starter pack, and like the first picture is the Edison bulb, and then, you know what I mean. And I just laugh, and it's funny. But I think if someone had to make a meme like a little poke, a little jab at Broken City, it could be in that realm of there's a little bit of cliched aesthetic to it, but it didn't start out that way. And I think I've made a conscious effort of obviously laughing at it, but then trying to push away, like, well, that's not what it is. That's to oversimplify, like, what we're doing.
And one thing, dude,
you know what I mean?
It's the easiest thing in the world is to make fun of something. Yeah. You could be like Ansel Adams, black and white all the time, like doesn't even know color, or whatever, But here's another analogy that popped into my head. I feel like the most positive way we can look at it, and the way I kind of feel maybe is best reflective of the three of us and how it's not confining, is that I feel like we're more like lenses. It's like, let's say, you're a wide angle lens, I'm a 50 millimeter, and K Shaw is a fisheye or whatever, or I'll be the fisheye, whatever. And then those are our lenses. We can look at anything through them, but that's how we're going to see things with that scope. Like, the Adam lens, the Mike lens, the Kevin lens, and we can aim it anywhere and look at anything in life, and that's how it is. And we're traveling through life on a little tour with our cameras, and then like putting the pictures together. That feels kind of right. And we all have a little tent. You know, there's some like, I don't know who has the rose-colored lens. Maybe none of us. Maybe that's what we're missing, is the rose-colored lens.
It, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have like an amber filter on mine. I like earth tones.
It's funny that you brought that up, because I made a deliberate attempt last year with the fall show to like, what is the color that is the furthest away from what people think Broken City is. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, well, the color blue is cool usually. And it's somewhat associated with technology, and just tried to find all the reasons why blue is a bad choice. I'm like, okay, well, how would we make blue work? Just as sort of an exercise, just for fun. And I started messing around with it, and we came up with the aesthetic, and you and I went on the little mini photo shoot. And
the first time you brought that up too, I instantly went like, oh my gosh, it's so right. And since I just said amber colored lens, when you take orange in that earth tone and you flip it, you invert it at Photoshop, you get blue. So blue is literally the opposite of that orangey, warm Edison bulb glow. But what's cool is when you see blue and orange-ish together, it's like there's something beautiful about it, because they are opposites, but they go.
Right, but it's also, I found this out obviously in editing the floor and the costumes, picking the fabric, and it can go wrong real quick. Like you can end up with blue and orange, and then where's your go-to? Like when I say blue and orange, what colors are you thinking about? You're probably not thinking about the aesthetic that we had on the floor last year.
Right.
And
yeah, you think pumpkins and
it's
neon lights.
Yeah, it's a very modern, high sheen vinyl.
Yeah, we like orange with a lot
German
of brown.
band with blues and oranges. So it was like this challenge, like, well, how can I use these colors and not mess it up, basically. I mean, not very eloquent, but that's basically what happened. And then I think the what we came up with the way the floor turned out, which ended up looking like a Middle Eastern rug, but it was actually just a combination of the sky and the fall leaves, and lots of Photoshop trickery and
lots of layers and
filters and stuff. But we finally came up with the I guess the world in which the show would live. And, and that was those are things I enjoy doing. Like this year, there's a little bit of, I don't know if you call it like a rebellious element to like how the show will unfold aesthetically and musically, but there's a little bit of rebelliousness in there with what people think Broken City is, and where they think it comes from, and sort of trying to challenge ourselves, and then so we don't get stuck in the meme kind of cliche universe of everything's just this way, and this is
that's that part of the striving. You don't want to just you don't want it to become easy when you've created something that's very clear, I guess.
Right, and another way to put it would be if you say, well, hey, do something different, is really open-ended and almost the easy way out, where it'd be more of a challenge, more fun to say, do something different with all the same stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's where it gets like exciting for me, and it goes back to that question. So no, I don't feel like we have
I don't think
done all the possibilities.
Yeah, you can't reach. There are enough variables to. I think if you feel like you've reached the end, maybe you're looking in the wrong direction, or we're not trying hard enough.
Yeah, you could actually extend this whole like analogy to just marching percussion, like snares, tenors, bass.
Yeah,
and you could say
popular music, drums, bass, guitar, keys, vocals.
Yeah, it's like do something different with all the same stuff. Like what makes this ensemble recognizable and sound different from this other ensemble, and you could close your eyes and listen to some groups and go, I know exactly who that is.
If here's a question that maybe you could file it under stupid, but if you came out one year in SCPA or WGI and you had 3 groups of things on the floor, but they weren't snares, tenors, and basses, they were like logs, twigs, and berries. It was something else.
Can I stop you there?
Yeah, something else that you were hitting that was in sections. Would you be disqualified?
No.
It was like trash can lids and blah blah blah.
But I can tell you, I can throw some subjective opinion. It's redundant.
It just becomes a different thing,
right?
Activity.
So yeah, and I've actually come across a version of this question quite a bit, and I think if I could repose it like this, and I could say, let's have a train sound. So we want this to sound like a train, and the whistle's blowing, and the tracks, the wheels on the tracks, and the brakes, and the steam, and everything. But you can only use a string quartet. To me, that's where the magic happens, is when you have this constant of snare, tenor, bass.
Yeah.
That, to me, that's why I do this, because of the challenge of if somebody said, actually, this is a real thing that somebody told me maybe 20...
I was going to ask you to talk about this, because it's interesting the way you approach how you go for textures and how you use the instruments. So tell the story you were going to tell.
Okay,
before I
I'm not sure
interrupted
if it's the story that you're expecting, but this is over 20 years ago, and I had a band director, and when he said it, when the words came out of his mouth, I was just shaking my head like,
you idiot.
Yeah. But he said, okay, so the drum solo is high noon. Like the opener is morning, the drum solo is high noon, and the closer is dusk or whatever. And I'm sitting there going, how do I make battery percussion sound like high noon? Like it's hot, the sun's out, and we're baking under it. How do you make battery percussion sound like that? And I don't want to comment on whether or not it worked or I pulled it off. That's because that's not really important. What's important is that
it's kind of important.
I was
to him it was.
It wasn't. But it's the fact that I sat there and pondered it, and like I made decisions based off what I thought high noon would sound like. And
so you didn't blow it off. That's kind of cool. So you just kind of went. No. First you were like, yeah. But then you were like, all right, let's try.
Right. So.
And it changed you, right?
So to me, that's where the magic is, though. So if you were to say, like, I don't think it's too creative to come out with twigs, logs, and berries. It's more creative. Can I make a snare line sound like a twig? Can I make a tenor line sound like berries? Can I make a bass line sound like logs? And they kind of already do. But
twig and berries. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
completely. And
that's where the cool stuff is for me.
That is the story that I remember you telling. And yeah, I remember asking you about some of your creative process with battery, and I remember you saying that a lot of what you write, I remember looking at it, knowing that I'd played your music a zillion years ago, but the level of writing in terms of just the difficulty level of the rhythms you write, to me is, I can't believe there's a bunch of people out there who can play that stuff. It just, there's so many, like, you know, 5s and 9s and 7s and over triplets over, you know, like stuff that just seems, wow. It's like Frank Zappa, the Black Page kind of, that's an old reference, but extremely not funk. Like, you know, it's not like it has like it's all about the pulse and you want to feel it and you like, doom, doom, like whatever. But it's like what happened? Like it's almost like at some point, and you've always had a little bit of that in your work, more with regards to dynamics and the way you use buzz rolls and things and create illusions of rhythm that hide the pulse but it's not about being clever for you. So can you talk a little bit about that aspect of how you approach getting textures and what is it that you're thinking in the creative process when you go to write it down? Because you're not just thinking like what's going to look good written or what's going to be groovy necessarily, unless that's the point. But is this a question that you can answer even?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like I've answered a form of this before. I feel like I have this go-to, but it's still true. I think it's because I slightly tongue-in-cheek, because I hate drums. Like the sound, they're just obnoxious. And how do I get a drum to not sound obnoxious? I think I secretly want to be like a string player. And I don't have that ability, talent, and background.
You're seeking to get that out of the thing that you happen to be.
Yeah, like I still remember this Kawhi K4 patch, soaring strings. And it's like, God, how do I make a snare line sound like soaring strings?
Is it ever like metaphorical? Like, have you taken it further than the high noon thing and been like, I want this to sound like waves, or I want this to sound like...
Every time I write.
Okay, so it's always some sort of...
Yeah, and I don't know if this is the right, categories to put things in, but I've always thought of things like when I listen to other people's music, I can put them in mostly 2 different categories. Generally speaking, that doesn't mean they don't do different things.
Great and awful.
Depending on the context of what's happening, but generally speaking, when I listen to compositions, battery compositions, I can say, well, this is very rhythmic. This is rhythmic exploration, very virtuosic, math oriented.
Yeah.
And lots of, I would say, like Afro-Cuban or Latin influence in the rhythms that are chosen to play.
So they invoke movement in a way. Right.
And then there's textural writers.
Yeah.
Which it's hard to pick out the rhythmic properties, and it's all textures. I feel like the texture writers are a little more rare. It's a different type of virtuosic requirement.
Yeah.
As far on the part of the performer, like you're doing different things or different sensitivities when you're playing something textural as opposed to rhythmic. Rhythmic is more like when you see somebody just achieving with a rhythmic approach. It's like it's you can see the 10,000 hours. Like it's so articulate and perfect, and you can just imagine the amount of preparation all that took, and not just for that particular piece that they're playing, but the development of that human being to be able to play that piece is apparent.
And wouldn't you say it's often imposed on them by a composer though? Like,
no, I think kids, I hate to say kids because some of them are 22, but
well, I just mean that if you're drawn to drums, you're not drawn to drums in order to express a string sound. Usually it's like you're drawn to drums because of the rhythmic aspect.
Right.
And then I think there's almost like there's a drummer, you're a drummer, and then completely separate than being a drummer, you're a composer. And the composer side of you wants the drums to sound like strings or waves or high noon, and the drummer side of you understands that it's the pulse side and the primal element of rhythm. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, but I think there's always a context to it. Like, if I say, okay, I want this to sound like, soaring strings or waves or whatever,
mm-hmm.
and then the next question is, well, how can I do that while making sure that I'm attracting a a membership that's actually able to do this, because it takes a certain level of skill set level and talent, and development of talent to be able to play these things to give the illusion to actually achieve the texture you're looking for. It's not just because, oh, here I wrote this and then it works.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just write something and then that's what it is. There's a lot of the textural stuff, and even just all music in general. There's the way you teach it, your expectation of how it's interpreted. It's super important. So if you want that level of performer that can handle all those nuances, well, at some point we have to talk about the reality that you have to be attracting those performers. So if you are pure 100% writing as a composer, you're missing it. Like I can't do that. I have to have. There's a reality that I need to attract people that really want to do this. I need to make this, like, I can't waste their time. This is something that they give of themselves. They pay money to do this, spend time away from their families and whatnot. And how do I make that worth it for them? There's got to be a reason why playing this approach is cool and fun and why they'd want to do it. So that's always a challenge. It's always on the front of my mind. And I would say if you were a rhythmic type writer where you had a lot of Latin, Afro-Cuban kind of influence with how you write, or even just beyond that, more like classic American rudimental style writing, which, you know,
whatever.
Yeah.
I guess that's sort of Afro-Cuban.
It'd be whatever. Some Brazilian in there, I think. There's some Brazilian in there.
What would be the classic American, like
just rudimentals, the things that are based off rudiments. So whatever. But if that's your thing, you have that challenge as well, because there is a sense, if you're a top-notch performer, like if you are the 1% of snare, tenor, or bass drummers out there, you're looking for that special something where you want to spend your money and your time. And that rhythmic approach, they have to find, like, what is the thing that's going to bring kids here. So they might be looking for what's the new and cool rudiment. Like, how can we combine these stickings to make something that no one has ever played before? That might be an approach, and that's a valid approach, and that's something that's going to attract a certain type of kid.
Can I jump in here, because I think drumming is. I think all instruments are like this, but to go with my own little confirmation bias about it, something that's interesting to me and seems different about drums. Maybe because it is such an old instrument. Maybe it is because it's the foundation of dance and things like that. That drumming attracts a lot of different kind of people, and I believe that it attracts. Let's say that if on some level, and I don't even know if this is a valid point to make, but if on some level you can put athlete here and artist here on some level, because I think on one level of analysis you probably can.
I don't think that's a stretch. I think that's reality.
I think it is too, but I think there are definitely great athletes who are great artists, like even martial artists, although you could debate how much that is an art and not, or whatever. But
I meant in the context of what you would see on a DCI field or a WGI field.
Yeah, and they even call it sport of the arts for a reason.
Athlete,
but
and
I think the point is that I think there are drummers who are very interested in difficulty level, speed, things that you would associate with a sport. This is an achievement of physical prowess and just how coordination, like prowess, coordination, fast twitch muscle fiber, some sort of intellect, all that coming together like it would in a sport. And then I think there are drummers out there who are also lean completely to the other end of the spectrum and are much more about like, wow, that final result is awesome. It's challenging, but it's challenging in a completely different way than it would be from an athletic, purely speed and coordination and accuracy approach. And it's almost like you've just kind of put your flag in the side that is more the textural side, and that just attracts a different kind of drummer who's maybe more interested in the result than maybe the action. And then they probably find, I mean, obviously it's still drumming, it's still sticks, it's still rooted in rudiments to some degree when you dig deep enough, right? I mean, you're still going right, left at some point.
Right. And I think that it's where I came from. It's what I did as a teenager. I sought out where I wanted to be based on composition.
Yeah.
Although, as a younger teenager, I was, enamored by the rudimental side and the rhythmic side and all that kind of virtuosic complexity. But
it's the foundation, wouldn't you say? Would you say the other thing is built on top of it?
Yeah, I mean, because it was also the first time I'd ever seen it, and I didn't know hands could do that. And then as I approached 19 and 20, I definitely followed composition. It was like, all right, whose book do I want to play? That's where I'm marching, and I don't care what place they took, and I don't care where they're from. That's where I want to go. So my hope is that, my hope for everyone, not just like what we're doing, but every ensemble, is that everyone has their niche, like there's
a valid place to be for everyone, kind of.
Right, this focused group that they're targeting, like they're not trying to be all things to every type of performer, that they have a certain focus, and that's going to make everything better. That's like rising tide right there. That's the ultimate.
Which seems like it's funny because whenever we get into these conversations, I feel like part of the fun of them for me is to try to push you into a corner. But you navigate in a way that's hard almost for me to understand. Maybe you can tell me like how it is you think about it, but you're able to be extremely opinionated, really know what you like and what you don't, and have a strong sense of artistic identity in what you do, without it being an us and them mentality, or without diminishing things that are not part of what you do. And I've had to learn how to do that through just being a professional in the music industry and having to understand, when my own tastes are getting in the way of a specific goal. Like an artist can come in and have a whole world of what's allowed and what's not, and sometimes it feels some parts of it can feel arbitrary. Like, wait, this is cool and this is stupid. Like, all right, whatever it might be. Whether it's like, you'll use a snare that sounds like this, but not one that goes, if the one's stupid and one's not. And that's often like a really useful tool. It's like, it's you want to have this, I call it like a subjective objectivity, where you feel like your opinions are facts. So like, that's the way it is. I think. And how do you deal with it for you? Because you're very much about like the rising tide raises all ships. Like you have to feed the thing that you're a part of. And so you can't have one animal running around destroying the future for all subsequent animals. Yeah, so you're about the health of the activity.
Right. So I guess the way I would look at it, the way I'd navigate it, is that I think it has a lot to do with intent. Like, what are you trying to do? Oh, you're trying to do that? You're doing it wrong. You will never get that doing it that way. So that's a really strong opinionated.
You're looking for like cohesion.
Right. But however, I am not saying that what you're doing is the wrong thing to do. I'm not saying that thing that you're doing right now is wrong. That's not how you drum, or that's not how you approach that. What I'm saying, the subtlety is that, what are you trying to achieve? Well, I'm trying to achieve this. You'll never achieve that doing it that way. Mm-hmm. So now what's wrong?
Yeah.
So I think there's a subtle distinction there. It can certainly be taken out of context, but
it's about intent, and it's about not being
right. So
an authoritarian.
Here's a great way to look at it. So you could look at any ensemble and the way they drum. You can break down their philosophical approach to drumming. Like, why do they hold the stick that way? Why is there fulcrum in that particular place? Why do they use this particular motion and this grouping of muscles to achieve this attack? And maybe they have a height system based on inches or whatever. Why do they do that? Let's break it down. Mm-hmm. And then I can make a judgment on whether it's valid or not. Like, here's the easiest go-to is, can your left hand make the same sound as the right hand? If so, then it's a valid technique. Then it doesn't matter what your rules are, it doesn't matter what your philosophy is. It doesn't matter if you use inches or a dynamic system or if you're using touch to create dynamic rather than height. It doesn't matter. None of that matters as long as, like, can your right hand make the same sound as your left hand and vice versa? And if that's my first sort of like, legit style, I dig that. And I can appreciate things that other groups do. And just to put this a little bit more accurately, I feel that let's just take the top 12 of DCI, for example. Mm-hmm. I feel like everybody in the top 12 is doing that. Like, I can look at the top 12 and go, massive achievement. Everybody's good. Everybody has a legit, well thought out philosophy that values different things and puts different things on the hierarchy. Like, what's more important to you, this or that? And as you shift those elements on the hierarchy, your style changes. Because you're giving more importance to one thing or another.
Right.
So I know what we do. I know why it looks the way it does. I know why it sounds the way it does, because I know what's on the top of that hierarchy, and I also know what's second, and I know what's third. And so all of those different approaches are all legitimate, and that's how I can be more of a like philanthropic approach, like a rising tides kind of approach, where I don't back myself into a hole.
You know, it's interesting. I threw this out as like kind of just like a offhanded joke comment in the last podcast we did together, but like a separation between church and state. But I feel like that's actually more of a valid analogy in this case, because you're saying, if you looked at each hierarchy, like let's say, well, entertainment's here, depth of meaning is second or something, and then somebody puts depth of meaning at the top and entertainment second, whatever it is. Those are like different religions.
Yep. And they'll look different.
But the people who believe in those religions, it is almost religious. It's almost to the point of like a belief system. And that's what I think is really interesting, and not to like stroke your ego here, but I think it's really admirable that you really believe in, like, you have a religion, you have a way that you think and a thing that's at the top of your hierarchy, and you really believe it. I think you do, because it's so consistent, and I've heard you talk about it with that belief, but I sense a reluctance for you to put that belief out there publicly because you care so much about the separation of church and state. Like, you don't want to diminish another religion, like another hierarchy of aesthetic belief in the activity, because you believe that they should all be there.
Are you gonna tell your friend or your neighbor like how to decorate their house? I mean, that's how I look at it.
For
it's
sure. Like, no, I'm kidding.
Maybe. And you can walk away from that experience and say, "Oh, it's not my thing," but I enjoyed it, and I feel like it's.
But again, I guess there's.
I don't want to say we have to be careful, but it's. You don't want to.
The activity is careful for you, though. Like, sorry,
but you don't want to. You want to be like a quote like hater and say, well, and take away from somebody else's achievement. Well, but they do this and they do this and they sound bad here, and it's a little more. And I feel like if I'm honest, I've done that, and I've done it usually in my own living room where nobody's watching and nobody's listening. But then it's also an opportunity for me to hear myself. It's an opportunity to say, how about we rethink this? And let's not like, do you really think that? Like, no, I don't really think that. Like, if I want to say, well, they don't sound good, or they do this thing and then that makes them lame.
It's cheesy, or it's
manipulative.
Or...
But then when you actually like look at it in a non-emotional state, it's like, no, man, this is super cool that this exists, and look how hard that was to put together. Like, look at everything else. And so what you're seeing, like you said, in a difference in religion, what you're seeing is just, you're seeing the order of hierarchy. You're seeing, clearly entertainment is at the top of the list here, and whatever is second and third and fourth. So as soon as you do that, everything starts to look different and feel different. I think that's an awesome thing. I think if we had organizations out there with the same DNA, it would be incredibly boring.
Yeah, and it's the core of this whole conversation is like a freedom of speech core. And even when you talk about like, Jordan Peterson talks about that speaking is thinking. And you said, like, in the privacy of your home, you can say these things, and you can go, and then you go like, oh, whoa, did I just say that? And did I really think it? Or maybe somebody will respond to you, like you're in a design meeting or whatever it might be. You start to hear your own thoughts bounce off a person, and that's how you sort of are contained. And, obviously one of the worst things for anxiety and depression is solitude, because you just think all this stuff and you can create a whole world in your head. And speech is so important. Like, that's why talk therapy can be so great, or even just having a relationship with a friend where you can say things and the friend can just give you that look like, dude, you're not going to die today. Like, whatever. If you have some crazy thing you're thinking that's like, whatever, you have a little pain in your elbow and you're like, I'm dying. If you're hypochondriac or something, it's like, it can help to say that out loud. And then you realize like, oh yeah, maybe I'm not. But it's interesting because when you get into the like, I'm one who believes that art has an incredible amount of power to affect us in small ways and big ways. It can really, it's like a soul medicine. It can, if we listen to the right song at the right time, see the right movie at the right time, whatever, it can genuinely kind of change our path and get us thinking differently, or get us thinking at all, or get us feeling things we didn't know we could feel, or that we want to feel more. It's an amplifier. It's an aimer of thought and motion and all this stuff. And I think here's where I struggle, is my belief in that is so strong that it's hard for me not to think that there is a responsibility that comes with being an artist, especially like, you're going to spend let's say your whole life doing this hierarchy, and you're going to put that at the top, or like whatever it is you put at the top. Like, I feel like there's some responsibility for that thing at the top to have a lot of meaning, but there's room for everybody. So it's difficult for me because I go to music mostly for certain reasons that aren't as much for like just entertainment or something. Music isn't just something I throw on. When I'm listening for entertainment, it's more because I enjoy the sonics of something. It's not that I'm listening to a fun song. I'm listening because I love music and how it can impact you or something. Like I listen to mixes, great mixes of any genre, and that's entertaining to me. But there's something to be said for maybe putting something at the top of the hierarchy that maybe if you put it second, you would get more fulfillment, give more to the world, find out more about yourself. It would be a greater good that you do if you took maybe entertainment and put it second and put meaning first. So I really feel like meaning and entertainment are the things. Like, and when I say entertainment, I kind of mean more escapism or some sort of shallow approach that's meant to just be like, candy. I think of it maybe in terms of like, you put mouth in your mouth hole. Of what? Wait, no, you put food. What the heck am I saying? You put food in your mouth hole.
Dessert versus main course.
It's dessert during main course, but like, what are you feeding your ears? Is basically
Well,
what I'm asking.
I wanted to comment on that because some people think it's not art, and that's their version of the art, is that it's not art, and I think that's totally okay, and that's how
having
we get.
No game is my game.
Style is there is no style.
Yeah.
So it's. I mean, there are people that I've talked to that are very prominent in this activity that have said the actual words, "This is not art. I don't believe what we do is art." And
I'd be curious to hear what they think is art, though. Anyways.
Well, I think it's good. Like, we need, like, this activity, and we'll call it an art form, needs people who think it's not art, because those people will do stuff that the artist won't do. They will keep us in check.
And
there are ensembles out there that are freaking crazy, and they will be on the cutting edge of everything that's possible with your hands and sticks that other approaches just will not do. And I think it all balances out. Like,
that's what you get in a free world where because let's say I took my belief system and went insane with it and went authoritarianism, and then like somehow got the power to force everybody to put entertainment lower on the hierarchy or something. That's not good. It's authoritarianism. It's a bad thing to just think you're just all right about one thing and take it and force everybody else to do it. That's why the individual is sovereign. That's all so important. And what's interesting is you could take somebody, let's say the composer of an indoor percussion show, that says like, this is not art. Well, they're not doing it by themselves. So like, you take something that's not art, and then you have maybe some percentage of the people on the field, what do they call it? On the floor. Are, it's likely that some of their members are going to be artists thinking they're doing art or approaching it with an artistic mentality. I mean, then you're going to get this cool blend of like this tension between the non-art and the art approach to that non-art or whatever. If
I could like direct a movie scene and have, two people facing off, it would be, I don't think, like, one person A is, I don't think this is art. And person B is, that's great. Just remember that you're going to be challenged by those of us who feel like this is art. So just know that's out there. And then person A can say, well, you can do your art, but you got to know that we're out here too. And we're going to keep you in check. I think there's a beauty in that. Like there's a virtuosity and there's skill sets left that are still left undiscovered, even with 2 drumsticks and 2 hands, that we just continually push forward. Like there were these brand new hybrid crazy rudiments, I remember, like near my age out year, that are just standard vocabulary now. Like every high school kid can play it. Mm-hmm. And I remember it being like this new thing. And it's like anything else. It just keeps going and going and going. Who's pushing that envelope? It's not the artist.
I don't know.
No, it's not rudimentally. I mean, rhythmically, texturally, simultaneous responsibility, those types of things are more.
You're just saying the things that push more of the sport limit.
Yeah. And
difficulty factor.
I am absolutely broad brushing here just to make a point. So yeah, there's exceptions to everything, but broad brushing, typically speaking, someone who's looking at this activity as it's a form of expression, it's a way for these young people to put their skills to use to to throw all of their emotions and everything just into this project, this endeavor for 4 months, and give their heart and soul to this thing, and bring that to life through either like abstract art or storytelling, or something that doesn't exist in the world already. Basically, that's how I would kind of subdivide it. Meaning, we're not doing West Side Story. You know what I mean? It's like these groups out there that try to attempt to create something new that doesn't exist within their medium, right? So that's the category I'm talking about. So then you have another category that's about excellence and achievement, and like, we are going to be perfect, everything we do. And these aren't one or the other, by the way. There's plenty of groups out there that do both. Mm-hmm. But I'm just for point of the conversation, I divide it up. I would say the mentality, not necessarily the human being, but the mentality of being virtuosic and pushing the envelope with what new discoveries can we find with these rudiments that we can do with our two hands. Like,
right.
What new stick trick is there? Whatever. Like, whatever that thing is, that mentality is slowly churning out default vocabulary. It's like things that were brand new and groundbreaking in 1990 are just standard vocabulary right now. And then it just keeps happening. The newest stick trick and crazy rudiment that's going on right now at the upper ends of this activity, like people who the best hands in the industry, those will be standard vocabulary in 20 years.
Yeah,
or less.
I guess part of it is, there's a competitive factor. So I think any art form, any activity, any business, whatever, but whether you look at it as art or not, that's like, you get into like, is there an agreed upon definition of art? And I believe there's people who can say, I'm not doing art, and they are. It's like what you say you're doing and what you're actually doing. It's easy for that not to be the same thing. But I think that
you may say that that's art and can be perceived as that, but for them it doesn't change their hierarchy. I think that's the more important distinction, is that if they say it's not art, they are telling you what their hierarchy is. But
there needs to be an agreement on what the definition of art is, because they can say what I'm doing is not art, and then they push the entertainment thing to the point of art, and then they still say I'm not doing art, and you look at them and go like, well, that was transcendently entertaining to the point where I felt like I had some sort of awakening. Like I think that's possible, because they're dealing with the tools of art. You could just like you can say whatever you want about anything, but you can't necessarily change what it is. Like I believe that about sex. You can say whatever you want about sex, and people can use sex in all different kinds of contexts. But I believe there's a role that sex plays in relationship, and obviously with procreation and stuff. And you can do the thing outside the role, but you're going to pay the price if you do something, and with an maybe it's about the attitude or the context. And I think you can't, no matter what you say about it, you can't change it. I know that's a strange analogy to make, but you could have 100 one-night stands and say it was just whatever, it was just physical, it had nothing, there was nothing about it. But those people in the 100 one-night stands, there's a price you pay, I think, for treating something important like it's nothing. And I think that if you lived a life making art, not treating it as art, I think you might pay a price, being in your soul.
The devil's advocate here. I don't think they would say it's nothing, or that it's not meaningful. It would be like to them, possibly, I don't know, I'm not wired this way, but it would be like running a sprint. And you have the fastest time in the world and you win the gold medal. And it's through all the hard training. It's through your technical breakdown of what's actually happening. Like you've got slow-mo footage, you're running on the treadmill and you're figuring out, oh, if I, my wrist is 1 inch lower while I'm running, my times increase, So I got to watch that. I got to pay attention to that. Like you're just completely breaking down the science of what a sprint is. The same thing can happen.
Yeah.
With this activity, that there's people that have a very like proven method of success, and it's reliable and it delivers on demand. It's extremely impressive.
And I guess my question would be, what is it delivering? Because maybe for them, it's delivering an experience of having done it.
It's delivering the fastest time in the sprint and the first place finish.
Using what? Music, though. And that's
Right.
what I think. Like, I think if you're using music, you can use the tools of art and not make art, I think. And you can use the tools of art and make art. And then I think you can use the tools of art and make sort of art. But I think it's pretty hard to put a lot of work into music and have it be completely artless on every level, like as if a computer made it. I think what I'm talking about is sort of like this concept, I think, of transference. Like if you're going to emotionalize yourself through music.
But you could also say computer music can be art.
Because you're using the tools of art. You're using notes. You're using time. You're using these things that I believe God has gifted us with the tools of art, and we almost can't screw it up.
Right.
Just like C.S. Lewis talks about, getting back to my sex analogy, is that even you take something good and you can put it in a bad context, but there's still good in it. Like it's still, like sex is still going to feel good even when you do it in the wrong context. So even when you put something in the wrong context, you can't rob it of all its good. It's the bad is coming later. It's about the context and about maybe the fallout of what happens, but the act itself there's still something good about it. And that C.S. Lewis talks about that as being like, even the devil can't take the good out of something, even when he puts it in a bad context, which is, it's an interesting just thing to think
the
about.
fact that we're going round and round on this is, I think, proof that maybe it doesn't need to be defined. It just is what it is.
Yeah, you define it for yourself, kind of, right?
Yeah, the important thing.
Go.
Yeah, the important thing is that.
But balance is important.
When you said you went back to, I'll try to wrap this up super quick. When you said that we have a responsibility as in the showrunners, whatever title you want to give this thing, that the responsibility, I think, is keeping your head down and defining and digging deep within your own religion. And I'm using that in quotes, like whatever your philosophical approach is to
Your hierarchy of importance.
Yeah, either creation or even implementation, because sometimes those are completely two separate things. Like, here's how we play, here's how we implement, here's how we execute, here's how I write, here's how I design, here's my color palette. Like, sometimes those things aren't even in the same room, and that's fine too. But I think if every endeavor is keeping their head down and don't allow influence from other ensembles.
Make you insecure. You're talking about basically...
the activity is going to naturally move towards homogenization anyway, just through osmosis. But it's that much more important that we stay true to who we are, because then you've got, like, if you use the top 12 as an analogy, like you've got 12 distinct religions, if you will, and these versions of what people think the activity actually is. I have 12 versions of no, this activity is about this, and there's version 1, there's version 2, and 3, and 4.
Yes, you're advocating for authenticity.
Right.
Staying true to yourself.
Right.
Because I think probably the thing that would make you the most mad is if you can sense that a group is pandering or only trying to win, maybe, or something like that. Would you say that that's like a valid critique? If somebody won and you had a deep sense that it was only because of that they were pandering and it was all just like a scheme and they didn't actually believe it, it was arbitrary to them, all the choices they were making, they were literally just trying to, reverse engineer the judges' sheets. And inevitably there's a little bit of that going on at that level.
Yeah.
Because it is a competition, but
I have a hard time believing that someone would dedicate almost a year of their life to that. So
I don't. There's so many people out there that'll do whatever it takes to win or make money or.
Yeah, but at some point, but then
we all have that in us.
When do you have the tipping point where they're actually believing it? So I think that was my resistance to that. Is I think.
So you kind of believe that if you're doing that, you're probably not in the top 12.
No. I believe. Well, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you are literally pandering and you don't believe it,
it's just not going to be that good.
I don't think it's going to be good. I think people are going to see through it. But if you are, like, let's say 99% of the population is looking at you going, you're pandering, but you don't believe you're pandering, I think then it's fine. Because it's...
I think that's what happens a lot with pop artists who get undue criticism. I would say like Taylor Swift. I think she's been unfairly critiqued by people for being manufactured, not a songwriter, just a whatever, not very talented or whatever. And the results speak for themselves. It's like, okay, you can say that, but clearly her voice and those songs and her as a person is working. So you're kind of in the minority if you're going to go take that cheap shot.
And I think that's the important thing. It's not important how others view you. I'd say your authenticity is what's important. And as far as my experience is concerned, as much like criticism and opinionated, like just bias has come out of my mouth over the last 25 years in this activity.
Yeah.
Even regardless of all of that, I have a hard time believing someone would dedicate, like it's practically a full year of your life. When you watch one of these things unfold, on the day of finals, whether it's indoor or outdoor, it's basically a year of someone's life that you're viewing in that short amount of time. I don't believe anybody's faking it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably not sustainable to fake it.
Well, it's
personally and in terms of the activity.
Right. People have different tastes. People have different like set of hierarchy. Like we went through all that already. But
yeah,
I don't think you can even get anywhere near top 15 or top 12, whether it's indoor or outdoor, and fake it. I don't think it's possible, because it would be different if we locked somebody in a studio and said, all right, you have 2 hours, write a song and let's hear it in 2 hours. Then I'd say, okay, someone could be bullshit in 2 hours. But for a year, I think everybody is.
I think so, but
I think everybody is doing what they think is cool. And
maybe that's a little area of cynicism for me, because and maybe I'm speaking to it from a different world or perspective, just because I think there are all kinds of people out there with all kinds of motives, and the rewards are there. Like if I think of my activity, there are always pop songs, popular songs that you hear that they're just so saturated with trying so hard to be on the edge of what's trendy or be.
Well, there's a big payoff though, and there's not in this marching arts world.
It's all relative though. I mean, winning is a payoff. I mean, you get to keep your job, you get more funding, you get more sponsorships, it's relative, but let me just finish this thought, because I don't want to be misread in this either, or misunderstood. And I believe the people who are doing that, who are at the top of their game of writing the most trendy, maybe lack of meaning, no sense of responsibility with regards to morality or what they're putting out there in terms of like what kids are listening. They don't care. It's like it could be just all about debauchery, and it's about sounding just like the most entertaining, awesome thing, and it's so cool, and just not even care, blah, blah. Whatever it is. I do think that you can't do that on that level unless you believe it. Because the people who do thrive at that top level of music in the most trendy way with, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, whether it is rock and roll or it's hip hop, it's a metaphor, I think, for a kind of living and a kind of attitude that those people believe it, and you find that they're living it. And a lot of times they're the ones who are like, getting in trouble with the law or have crazy lives and tons of ex-wives and yeah. So I think it does get back to authenticity. If you're going to do something on a high level, it does take complete commitment and authenticity. It's just, what are you committing to, and what is it in your heart that's coming out? Is it something that's regressive or adding something on some level that's positive?
Well, the other factor that exists in this world is membership. So we've talked about this before, that every show, every seasonal endeavor
starts over kind of,
even
right?
Just even if you don't want it to be, it by default it's a commercial for the subsequent year. And
yeah, I wonder how much the activity would change if membership was like the presidency. It's like 4 years at a time, or like 2 years at a time, even just 2 years at a time. I think so many things would change, right? Because you'd have.
I don't know. 4 years at a time, maybe 2 years at a time. Most membership. I mean that the
what is it? Is it senators who are 2 years at a time?
the kids. I hate using the word kids, but I'm just for simplicity. They identify with a certain brand, if you will, approach, and they tend to be pretty consistent. I mean, you have a little bit of movement. Most of the movement, though, I would say, is at the top end, meaning to the top end. Like, let's say you're 16 and you live in a state that has one drum corps and it's within driving distance. So you put in a couple years there. By the time you're 18 or 19, you're able to catch a flight and march wherever you want.
Yeah, there's so many factors, and if you're good enough to be here, you may probably good enough to be over here. So.
But there's also a percentage of kids that just stay where they are, and they try to build that train, so to speak. But I don't feel like there's massive amounts of movement. I think once a performer reaches a certain level of achievement, they tend to be pretty consistent about what they want.
There's probably more movement when there's like a shift in, like I noticed this from the outside looking in, that it was interesting to see when Broken City went from OCI to Broken City, and there's a bit of a shift in I don't know what, there was multiple layers of shifting, but just we all came together and then made some decisions, and Kevin and I was involved to whatever degree, and just sort of like committing to a certain process or something, and then seeing that kind of emerge as a fresh voice, I guess.
Actually, some of that was didn't happen really that way, because we actually changed the name after auditions. So we had auditions and set the line, and then we changed the name.
But I remember this happening actually after that. It was like,
sure.
It was the middle one. Was it Spine?
Yes.
The auditions for the year of Spine were interesting because there was a lot of people that seemed to be coming over and switching back and forth and stuff. But I think that's just evidence of health, that there is that, and it's cool that there's the freedom for people to kind of go play around, and that if somebody leaves, I even recall that if somebody left and you having the idea of like, well, if they don't want to be here, then good luck to them wherever they go. And if somebody comes from another line, you're not going to be like, I don't want them, they're from there or whatever. It's more just like it's valid, I guess, to go wherever and be wherever and have whatever attitude and perspective you have. Everything is valid and nothing is wrong with anything.
Way to take a stand.
I saw the look on your face as I became more and more political. Let's answer one more question on the quick and then call it a day.
Boom.
Okay, let's answer this outside the marching arts domain. So just in general, who do you feel is up and coming and providing a fresh new voice to music that we haven't heard, seen or heard recently?
I don't know.
You can mention.
I don't know if I'm on the cutting edge of music fresh. There is I don't even know if I know his name. My daughter's in the other room. I can ask her. She exposes me to music that I'm not hip to.
Yeah.
It's John. Starts with a B. Oh man.
Bullion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dig that dude. I don't know why.
A handful of my students have been like, check out the song.
Yeah. So what's his name again?
John
Bullion?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that dude has
I don't know how to spell it.
He's got something special. Let's
get it right.
Yeah. It would break my heart if I found out that it's all contrived and somebody else is writing his songs. But as soon as I heard her play some of the MP3s, some of the tracks off his latest album,
yeah,
I was like, this guy writes his own songs.
Yeah, you could just feel it.
He's writing his own stuff. He's doing what he wants. He doesn't care what anybody thinks. And
it's JONBELLION.
That guy.
Yeah.
I love what he's doing.
Yeah, he's a singer, songwriter, and record producer. So
he's
self-producing his
stuff. You can tell right away, and that's...
he's known for a song called All Time Low. I thought it was like a member of the band All Time Low. Nope. That shows my ignorance.
But so if you don't know who that is, you're probably as old as I am. But anyway, check out his stuff. It's pretty cool. I like that dude.
Yeah, the stuff I've heard is cool. Shoot, I have to answer. I think I'm making so much music, and I've always had this thing where I just attach to a few albums or whatever and just listen, and it's weird. There's not enough input. But I would say that I think one of recent years, I'll say new, if you say new, the last couple years, there have been two songs over the last handful of years that have really stood out to me as like, oh, those are special, timeless, great songs, and they were both really popular, and it just made me go like, yes. And there's that little part of me that like connected to it on that level of like, ooh, it's like almost makes you jealous a little bit. It's like, that's a great tune. And one of those was Human by Rag and Bone Man.
I don't know it.
I'm only human after all, don't put the blame on me. That song. You ever heard that? It's great.
I don't think so.
I'll play it for you after this. It's a great song. And just, yeah. And then the other one was, oh my gosh, I'm spacing on his name to the point where I don't even want to say the title until I've Googled. His name always flies out of my head. Hosier, Take Me to Church.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of going back a few years, though.
Yeah, it's going back a few years, but I think that counts for me. And what's funny is both of those songs, the core of those songs are in blues. They're like really catchy pop-ish songs, more alternative than pop, I guess, but they're rooted in like a bluesiness, but they made it fresh through like the lyrical take on it and just the authentic nature of the song lyrics. The productions sound timeless and the performances are great.
Can I do an honorable mention?
Yeah,
this is my number 2. All Them Witches. They're out of Nashville. Super cool. You said blues, and I went there. Kind of a little bit of a throwback. They sound like they're little deliberate in their aesthetic, like using vintage approach, vintage recording techniques. But all them witches.
There's some of that going around. And what's something Rut, one of your favorite bands?
Oh yeah, I've mentioned that before. Middle Class Rut.
Yeah.
Out of Sacramento.
Cool band. That brings us to a close.
Yep. Bam.
Good night and good morning.